This is our January EDA meeting. It's January 23rd, Tuesday. And with that, we'll do a roll call
All right, so Rylan Eckhorst,
here.
Jamie Roth. Here. Paul Pendergrass.
Here.
Adam Beedling, not here. Jeff Shute,
Here.
Jan Thronson, and our vacancy. And then, just so you guys know, we have here today, Chris Geeson. He is one of the vice presidents with CETA, and he is here to kind of give a little overview of some, I guess, standard EDA training. Just to make sure that everybody kind of knows what our reach is, what our authority is, what we can do, what we can't, those kind of things. So I guess we can probably let you just get started whenever.
That's exciting then.
And then we can take care of other business once everybody gets here.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mayor and EDA Board. Again, my name is Chris Geeson, Vice President with Community and Economic Development Associates. Good to see everybody again. And I do appreciate you guys being flexible so I could attend a family funeral last time. So thank you for that. So good weather tonight. It feels like spring, so keep her up. But like Rebecca said, we've been talking about developing an EDA, growing your position within the community here for probably a couple of years now. And so I think this is really exciting that you have a functioning board. You're all set and in place. And so kind of that last step was to just talk about what your roles and responsibilities as board members are, what an EDA can and can't do under the Minnesota statutes, what kind of the role is with the city, what you're able to kind of take on as a board, all with the goal of kind of supporting what your missions are, what your individual goals are as board members, and what the community may want to see happen. So I know you guys have a lot of work ahead of you, and you've accomplished a lot so far. But I just wanted to kind of go through a few different things, and this is one of my favorite presentations to give. So I could spend hours on it. I don't want to spend hours on it with you tonight, but certainly ask questions as they come up. We kind of cover a lot of ground, especially from a higher level, but if there's something you want to dive into or worry about, or even if you heard something somewhere else from another city that they did, or you saw something in the paper somewhere, how did that work, or what other cities do? Happy to give you my frame of reference from my perspective. So this is something we're happy to do again anytime, especially if you get new board members. Typically we have some cities that will take us up on this every year, just kind of as a refresher. Once you guys become more grizzled veterans at economic development, you'd probably be old hat, but you do get new board members, you do get new people. We're happy to come back and do this, no charge. It's just a good way to make sure everybody's on the same boat. So I did include kind of the slides in your packet. It's helpful. I mean, we can't put them up on the screen, but I just thought I would kind of go through them. There's probably about 6 or 7 pages here. But like I said, I'll just kind of jump in and kind of start from the big perspective of what an EDA is and kind of what your main goal is. An Economic Development Authority is actually a body politic, a subdivision of the state of Minnesota. So like a city, you guys are a division of the state of Minnesota in your own name, right, and legal authority. So how you guys are organized, how cities want to operate, there's some different latitude and things like that can be done. Most cities the size of Orinoco, it functions more as a department of the city than its own authority. But you'll see, especially in larger cities like St. Paul, New York, Chicago, you'll see actual functioning separate, more autonomous economic development authorities or port authorities or some of those types of figures. But we'll dive into that. So cities have had this authorization or the ability to create economic development authorities since the 80s. And it's set up by a statutory framework. So chapter 469 is where it's found in Minnesota. Basically, it just runs through all the different powers, all the specific requirements to set up an EDA. You guys have accomplished a lot of that already. So that's more of just kind of knowing that that's out there. And if there are questions, certainly your city attorney can answer the more specific legal questions, but that's kind of the jumping off point to find those kind of those quick and easy answers that might come up. But that statute basically dictates everything from the authority that you are given by the city council. It talks about how many members you may have. It sets up that enabling resolution, which you guys did probably about a year ago now, almost a year ago. And that enabling resolution is really that foundation piece for everything you're allowed to do. In order to change your board size, the composition of the board, different restrictions that may be in your enabling resolution, you'd have to actually go through the same process to update that resolution. So if someday you decide, gosh, we're just not getting enough people to show up, we have problems with quorum, we want to go from a 5 to a 3 or a 7 to a 5 or a 3, whatever those combinations are. You actually have to go through that public hearing process, restart the process, which is initiated by city council. So that's one of the most common things we see with EDAs. Sometimes we'll start working with a community. You guys are in good shape, but I've seen some where you walk in and there's like 13 members. Great idea, great that everybody's excited and wants to participate, but technically you can't do that. So just making sure that everybody's in compliance with that and go from there.
Out of curiosity.
Yeah.
The enabling resolution, is that something the city council did or that's something else?
Yes.
Yeah, we did it back in September of 2021.
Oh, it's been that long.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I was thinking
One of
last
the first
spring.
things we did. So it's resolution 20, well, it's out there and we should probably include it.
Like I have a copy of that.
Maybe you do. I think it's 2021, September, October.
Would you email it to me, Rebecca? I just would like to see that stuff and curiosity.
Yeah, typically with cities, and I think this is the route that Orinoco took, was basically you have the authority to do anything that state law allows if the council approves it.
Yeah, the reason we did it early on, then we waited for the elections and
Gotcha,
we picked it up in spring of 2022 actively.
gotcha.
So the way it's drawn up is that this authority reports to the city council for,
Essentially, yeah, it acts more as an advisory committee. Some cities will interpret that to say, we have given you a budget of thus and such for marketing. And therefore, when it comes to that budget and the dollar amounts, you guys get to figure out what that means and go do it. You don't have to necessarily come back to the city. It's everything is approved. So kind of that practice kind of evolves over time, what makes most sense given the relationship there. But yeah, so if you were in one of the more autonomous cities, that enabling resolution may not have any limits in there. And it just might be that the city or the EDA can operate autonomously. And we'll get into some of the more specific powers, but you'll see that there's a lot of things that technically you guys have the right to do. If you, and in Orinoco's case, the council would be willing to do it. So, yeah, it's kind of fun to dive into those, but again, that'll talk about your officers, your budgets, your resources, where you get your dollars from. In Orinoco, my understanding is that that's just, again, more like a city department type situation where the city levies dollars out of its general levy fund or general levy and allocates to that. And then again, any restrictions on the powers that you might have. EDAs combine the powers of port authorities and housing redevelopment authorities, so HRAs. Most enabling resolutions, which I believe Orinoco's has done too, is basically enacted not only the powers of EDA, but as a housing redevelopment authority too. So if at some point in the future you wanted to own and maintain a housing complex for certain purposes, you have the abilities to do that, to access some of the funding sources, the underlying authorities to operate that as a public entity would be there. Most cities this size don't get into that, but there are a few, like Dodge Center, I believe, operates a pretty active HRA and actually owns and maintains some housing units and things like that. Homestead County has an HRA. They're pretty active in Rochester. I don't think they have anything here in Orinoco, really outside of Rochester,
We
but
have had at some time in the near future, the county HR has reached out to Orinoco
oh, okay.
about becoming more involved. David Dunn.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So I think sometime we'll have them invite them out to both the council and the EDA too, so.
Yeah. And so it's a great opportunity where you're able to actually co-opt the powers even and, work on a project jointly if the city and the EDA so chose to do. So, and then exercising the powers of development districts. That's a little more nuanced, but if you ever decide to establish like a tax increment financing district to help a project, which is basically just a property tax rebate mechanism. Before you can do that, you also have to create a municipal development district, which might be all or some of the city. So it could be a a particular block. It could be, a big area. In a lot of cases in cities like Orinoco, we just take the entire city and say, this is our development area. And we want to do projects and good things for the community within this area. I think you guys have one TIF district active for the CH Robinson property, if that rings a bell with you. So you probably have created a municipal development district already and didn't even know it.
Yeah,
So
TIF district, but that's 7 years, I think, and we must be in year 6 or 7. I'm getting pretty close.
Pretty close in there anyway, isn't it? It's been there quite a while.
say like 2016, 17, somewhere in there. So the development powers, I'll just kind of go through this list. If anything jumps out at you, let me know, but you can create those development districts. You can actually buy and sell property in your own name. So the Orinoco Economic Development Authority, Orinoco EDA, could go and buy property, hold it tax-free for 9 years under state law to promote economic development. So a lot of cities will do that with kind of the insight of an industrial park, maybe a commercial redevelopment or a commercial lot downtown. Maybe there's a blighted property somewhere that you want to see torn down or aggregate together a bunch of smaller properties to see some redevelopment happen. You'd be able to do that in your own name as opposed to the city of Orinoco. And it actually, from the surface, it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of another, but there's some nuances when it comes to the economic development side that allows more particular requirements of that developer to come forward. So with an EDA, when you sell property, you have to hold a public hearing and put it before the public as to the value of that sale. Is this a sale advisable? You don't have to take the public's advice, but you have to do that. You also have to have some certain things put into the deal that if that project doesn't, you have to identify what the project is going to be. And if that project doesn't materialize, you have the right to take that property back.
So you're saying that if the EDA acquired a piece of property, they have to determine at that time what that project is for?
Before they sell it. So you can buy pretty easily. There's very little requirements other than having the cash and, political power to do it. But when you sell it to someone, like if you guys had an industrial park or a lot and you wanted to sell it to me, I'd have to come in and tell you what I want to do with it. You'd have to hold a public hearing. You'd have to, and it may be very simple. What I want to do with it might just be mini storage. If you guys are okay with that and think that's in the best interest of the public, that's your prerogative. Or you might say, nah, we want to see something that's more creative or more that we're not investing public money into seeing mini storage occur. So that's usually one that comes up frequently, but.
So what about property for city use? You buy a piece of property for a public building or a new community center, or fire department, workshop. How does that work with,
There are some very creative ways that you can do that. And actually Lake City did that for their city hall. So the city of, and I'll touch base on this again, probably somewhere in my presentation, but essentially the EDA also has the authority to bond and in its own name. And there's some advantages to that. And I'm not an expert on that. You'd have to work with your municipal advisor on kind of the nuances of that. But essentially it can get you around your debt limits and also politically, I think it can help, or not politically. Yeah, you can get around the authority of requiring to go to a bond referendum. So you'd be able to just issue the bonds without a vote. And the city of Lake City, their EDA issued the bonds for their city hall building. And so the city pays the EDA rent in order to make that deal kind of palatable on all the different levels that need to be met. So there's some politics involved. There's some local, flavors there that, the city, I think, felt that they wouldn't get a referendum passed, but they still needed a new city hall. They had the cash to do it. And so it's how do we have the authority to issue the bonds and still make the project work? And so here's a vehicle to I don't want to say skirt the law, but I mean, it's all legal, but it's one avenue that you can take by having this board.
Well, if they had to issue bonds to do it, they really didn't have the money.
Well, they had the cash flow is what I meant. They had the
Ability to pay rent.
yeah. So, yeah. So, yeah, there's lots of ways to kind of skin that animal and see where that all goes. So, it's
Okay.
kind of a fascinating
I'm sure
tool.
Mike Bavani will guide us through it.
I think he was the one that set up the Lake City one, if I'm not
Pretty sure.
forgetting, so, yeah.
Set up half of CETA's.
So,
Michael
so,
Bonnie's our financial planner the city uses, so.
and actually, I would recommend maybe reaching out to him and having him give a presentation at some point. Maybe not till later this year, but just to talk about what tax increment financing is in more detail, what tax abatement might be. That's just a good resource to know when.
Renee went to one of his TIF tax abatement seminars here about a month ago
Oh, sure, yeah,
in St. Charles.
yes.
So that was a good exposure for her too as well, so.
You will see, if you haven't already, a lot of developers coming in asking for TIF. And I've yet to see many developers know what TIF really is, and a lot of times it's not applicable to what their project is. Or it won't create anything, or it's gonna be too expensive for what they do get. So just having a rough working knowledge of how it works is very valuable. Rebecca knows that. We've got people on our team, but we rely on folks like Mike all the time, so. So, in addition to buying and selling land, you can also enter into option contracts if you want. So if you knew there was a farm over there that you wanted to protect your interests or the city's interests, you're allowed to take options on land. You can enter into contracts in your own name. So whether, whatever you can imagine, you can enter into that as long as it's not illegal, I suppose. You can be a limited partner in projects too. So I've seen this happen where there's maybe a development of some sort that's a large undertaking, and maybe the city or the EDA, in this case, usually the EDA, wants to actually issue bonds or underwrite the project of some sort in some way. And so, maybe the EDA is an owner of a hotel project or I've seen it even like with wind farms. The Winona County EDA years ago got involved as a limited partner with some wind turbines. And actually, I think they had to get a state law change so that they could take advantage of the tax credits, because as a government, you're not paying taxes. That's how, so there's a lot of different ways where you can start getting into some of these projects that, as a partner, might make something that you see for the community happen. So property easements, again, if you need to get, utilities or things like that, you can acquire those. Purchasing supplies, you can accept public property and land. That happens quite a bit from, either the city turning over land to the EDA, maybe for some redevelopment purposes. Maybe the state has some old right of way of some sort. The tax forfeited properties is another one that, keep those on your radar as you're looking at projects to work with the county to maybe get your hand in the game when those come along. Be a government agent, conducts studies and research, and then public relations. So they're kind of the big development powers that you're able to exercise. Your financial powers, again, you can issue general obligation bonds. So general obligation bonds are simply the full faith and credit of the city of Orinoco. So if you don't pay the bill, Olmsted County will step in and pay it for you and put that on your taxes. So it's about the best security you can get in the lending world. You think of, putting a lien on your car or your house, this is even better. So that's a very, very good thing. It usually results in lower interest rates, more appealing buyers of that debt. So it's a big tool that cities use mainly for public infrastructure type projects or public buildings. But there are abilities for you to use that in some ways, more limited for public development as well. Yeah, public development and private development. Secondary market, you can sell the securities that you do have. So a lot of cities will create a revolving loan fund. You can be the primary lender. You can sell those loans off and recoup your investment, do those types of things. You can also invest in businesses. I mean, very few cities this size get into that, but there are some that do and have done very successful with that. But in order to do all that, you do need to have a business subsidy policy. I know that's something that's on your radar for your work plan. But basically in Minnesota, the business subsidy laws are kind of, I wouldn't call them complex, but they're not exactly a walk in the park either. In order to give any public dollars for private use, so any city dollars to a private business, you have to have this policy in place and on file with the state. very simple to do. It requires a public hearing. The city council probably should take a look at that as well and publish it in the newspaper. Once it's adopted, you can send it up to the Department of Employment and Economic Development deed. They say thank you and everything is good. But this policy can be as complex as you wish. There's some certain parameters that you have to follow. But generally, most cities your size are going to be looking at something kind of simple, it's kind of general, basically saying we're going to retain the right of ultimate review. Make it black and white enough of a policy to say no to the projects that aren't a fit that you need to say no to. But general enough that if there's something that's just needs to be approved, you'll have that flexibility. But it's usually looking at things like what's the value of the tax base, what's the value of the work or the jobs that are created. Is it going to be a strain on our public resources? So that's one that a lot of cities don't think of. You think of a big business that's bringing in 1,000 people to work at minimum wage. Okay, where are they living? What are the issues that they might need to be facing that we have to get involved with? There's a lot of things that can be related to that, especially if you're giving public money to subsidize the project. So it's just kind of a way to make sure that everybody has thought about the criteria for giving these public dollars to a private entity ahead of time. However, that all being said, most of the help that you're going to give won't be a business subsidy, and that policy doesn't apply. So even though you have to have that policy in place, if it's $150,000 or less, there's no requirements that you have to go through the process. If it's more than $150,000 and one of the exceptions, there's a list of exceptions to it, but in general, if it's over 150, you have to go through a separate public hearing before you can word that. You have to have an actual agreement with that developer as to what the subsidy is, identify what would happen if they don't meet their end of the goals, those types of things, as well as a job report to the state every year until those goals are met. So just know that if you're giving a large project, you're going to have to follow whatever your policy says to the word, and then also follow through with the reporting and all the aspects below that. Again, very rare does that happen unless you have a really big project that comes forward. And even when there's a big project, things like housing and redevelopment generally don't apply to that provision. But that's something we can help with. Your financial advisor would help with that too, but just so that you're aware. Financing incentives, that's the big thing that most people think of when they think of me. What can I get? How can you help me? What is the city going to do for me? This is kind of the meat and potatoes of once you're up and running, people will probably be coming and asking you about. As board members, the idea is you can be as much of an expert as you want to be on these. That's what Rebecca and us at CEDA are here for, to help you with that. But just knowing what types of things are available, what the city is helping with, what they're not helping with, is very helpful for those developers. There might be a business owner that approaches you on the street and says, hey, I heard the city, does thus and such. How do I get that? First, have them talk to Rebecca, have them talk to City Hall as to what the process is, what the rules are around that particular program. But just having enough knowledge to be dangerous with, I think that'd be a great fit. Let's figure it out. That positive attitude on connecting them. But there's some local programs that you can establish. Most frequently, that's going to be a revolving loan fund. That might be money that you set aside out of your own budget. More frequently, it's money that you get from a grant. The state has a number of different programs. USDA through the federal government has a number of programs that if you chip in, sometimes nothing, sometimes a little bit, sometimes half, they'll give you or they'll match that amount to seed a local revolving loan fund. One of the better ones that are out there right now is the Minnesota Investment Fund, which is administered through the state. A lot of times, and it changes all the time, but a lot of the times that program will allow you to the city will get a grant to then lend to a business. And it's usually in the manufacturing space. So if you had a manufacturer come in and say, I'm going to create 20 jobs, and they create those 20 jobs, they get the money, they get, the favorable terms on that. The city's administering that loan for the state, but the state then gives you up to 50%, sometimes more, sometimes a little less, maybe 20%, depending on what the political winds in St. Paul are doing that year. But essentially then you keep those dollars and can re-lend those into perpetuity.
But it has to kick off with a project.
Usually for that one, yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's easier said than done with all the rules that are in place at the time, but even those rules change from year to year, it seems like. So it's hard to say what specifically would get those dollars, but generally it's gonna be an industrial project that's paying above 115% of minimum wage, so it might be in that $15 an hour range type
Okay.
jobs, but then they qualify for so many dollars in loans versus what they're creating, so.
So like, this is our first year, and we really, outside of the contract for the seed and some supplies, we really haven't dedicated money to EDA. So is that something we should look at for 2025 as to or do we budget money for that and for seed money for revolving loan, or do we bring out of our general fund and designate it as a revolving?
It gets tricky because it's really high risk loan dollars. So, if you're levying dollars and have to raise taxes or not lower taxes to set aside a loan pool for what is generally a higher risk borrower, that can politically get challenging, knowing that they may not work out.
This was a bad year for that. but-
Yeah. So most cities, I have seen some that have done what you've suggested. But most will wait for that opportunity to apply for state funds.
Project by project.
Yeah,
Okay.
or the USDA, I can't remember the names, there's several of them. But even like through People's Energy, there's some opportunities through People's Energy. There's opportunities through we have several smaller revolving loan funds that could apply here in Orinoco too. So just because you don't have one locally, there are some around. The Initiative Foundation's another one.
When he talks about the funding it, is that something that we'd go to this Minnesota Investment Fund to seek out funds through those?
Yeah.
In there for seed money?
Yeah, so, and actually, that's a great question, because typically what will happen is you'll have a project that comes to you and says, I'm looking at expanding, or I'm doing, you have to have that project in order to qualify, because it is a grant to the city. But essentially, the city wouldn't necessarily have to put any money into this, in that scenario. You get the grant for this business, the business is paying it back with interest, and you're keeping a percentage of that and paying the rest of it back to the state. And so let's say you get to keep 20% of, $400,000 or whatever that loan is, with interest,
So it'd be just a pass through back to the state, and
Yeah.
keep your
Yeah.
in your 5% or whatever it is.
And then you end up with whatever that number is to relend to the next person. And so there's usually strings on who that next person can be and all that stuff, but that's a great way to get money without having to actually put any of your own local dollars.
You brought up, earlier you brought up, mentioned industrial parks. And
Yeah,
when it comes to something like that, is that something that in order to entice somebody to come to it, you have to have the services already there? Now, is that something we could use if something like that were to come about? Is that something we could use to supply the services
yes.
into the property?
Yep, either the revolving loan fund, there's actually state grants that you can qualify for that will pay half the infrastructure cost too, up to about $1 million. So there's other buckets of money too when it comes to things like that. But it's also not out of the question that a city just sees a strategic initiative and says, we're gonna invest in that as a city. We might put some deferred assessments on it. We might just pay for it and hope we get it out of the sale to refund our dollars or reimburse our dollars. But it just depends on how in need you are for that project, what the political appetite is. But that's all very, very common, and there's quite a few dollars up at the state to do those things. And even that one for the industrial park, there's no deadlines. I mean, it's just, you kind of fill the paperwork out as long as you can show that it's gonna happen and that something, good is gonna happen, whether it's a new business or you're just creating the park to be ready. If they haven't run out of funding yet, you usually qualify, so it's usually pretty good. And
Might want our own bridge to nowhere someday.
yeah. They try to avoid that. I wouldn't put that in the application. But, that's essentially where the money came from for that one, so.
We eventually did.
Wait, going back to the business owner side of, if you had a project that approached you and said, we want to do this, what would be the advantage to a business owner to say, I want the city to get a portion of this and I'm going to get X portion of this? Is it a better interest rate? Is it a,
Yeah, I kind of a lot of different things. So usually it's the credit decision is made totally on the need of the business. So if the business, comes in and says, I need $500,000. Okay. I can't get it at the bank, or I need some gap financing, or the interest rates are just too high. Generally speaking, you can negotiate that interest rate with the state. I've had some where it's a 15-year, 1%, fixed rate, type deal. So very advantageous when it comes to a commercial loan. The business loves that type of a loan because that just allows them to do more because they're looking at it just from a payment stream standpoint of every dollar going to interest is one less dollar I can invest in machinery.
It's always below prime.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always below prime.
And so if you have a loan program of your own, the state, in order to give more dollars to the business and then you keeping more dollars locally, they usually want you to invest your own loan dollars into the project too, so that everything's kind of moving through. But it's a great way to build your loan fund. And then for the next person, you can, make another loan, charge them, 4%, 3%, 8%, whatever your terms are. Usually it's a lower than market rate percentage on your own loan fund, but that business then repays you with interest, and then you can, turn around and do it again and do it again and do it again. I work a lot with the city of Harmony in southern Fillmore County. They had a business in 1988 that was buying some equipment, a manufacturer in town, and they didn't really need any real help, but they qualified for the program, and they knew that the city would be able to keep $100,000 of that program. And so they just worked with the city, even though they really didn't have to. And they went through the process, and the city got that $100,000 of their repayment, seeded their loan fund, and they've done 68, almost 70 loans off that $100,000. It's been rotated around about $1.4 million now. So I mean, you think about the success of that. They've only had two failures out of that whole thing since the 80s. So very successful version of that. I've seen some cities too that get that initial one and then are too afraid to use it again because they don't want to lose the money. I understand that, but it's there to be used in my mind. So it's kind of one of those things that, there's advantages locally to use that. They might be able to negotiate better terms just in general. We had one business that came in and said, gosh, we're looking at moving to South Dakota if we can't make this all work. We really want to stay here in town, but every dollar counts. And so the city actually went and said, we have enough in our revolving loan fund right now. We don't need any more. We'll sign a deal with the state that will actually forgive what you were going to pay us. So they ended up getting a forgiven, $20,000 to $50,000 forgiven through that process because the city just said, we'll be okay without that.
You said that one city just didn't want to make a second loan because they're kind of tickled that it worked once.
Yeah.
I'm afraid of a second time. If that were the case, would a city be able to do anything with them funds other than? Okay, that's why I was gonna make sure that's all before.
Every once in a while, the state, they've done it like 3 times, I think. They've passed a special law that's for a set period of time that says, okay, we know there's a lot of cities that have idle funds out there. Some of them are millions of dollars that haven't been touched in years. We'll give you a one-time pass. You write us a check for 80% of whatever you have, or for 20% of whatever you have, and you can keep 80%. So some cities have taken that up just
Is that
because.
one-time exception?
Yep. So they've done that a few times, but to me, it's nice having that in your back pocket because it can be used.
yeah, if you could buy more land or, yeah.
Yeah, it's, depending on the rules that are in there at the time, you really have to pay attention to what the state's gonna make you do with that turnaround. So sometimes you have to create separate funds every time you get a new one. So, separating out different rules doesn't get too complex and you can track it over the years and that kind of thing. Because once it's kind of dedicated as those state funds or USDA funds, all the rules are different and sometimes they're forever. Sometimes it's only once, sometimes it's, we don't really care. I mean, it can really just get tricky.
Sometimes it has sunset clause on it.
Yep. But you're talking about stuff that lasts 40, 50 years, the people are usually only around for a few years and then you get a new person at the state and keeping good records, good track of stuff is very important when it comes to this stuff.
And
Yeah.
remembering that the money comes back to revolving loan funds, I think is also important, because as far as people who don't want to spend them, I've seen it many, many times where somebody comes in and wants to get a loan, but there's only $45,000 left in the revolving loan fund, but they only want 30 of it. Well, but if we loan them that 30, then if somebody comes up to us, we won't have 30 again anymore. And it's like, well, but then no one's ever gonna get it.
Yeah.
So I mean, you will see that from time to time as far as just the different types of logic on particular projects that kind of
Well, can you
exposes
go get
itself.
more? I mean,
Yeah, as long as you qualify for it,
Right.
yeah. And once you have a little bit in your initial funds, I mean, it's really just looking for that first project once you're ready. Or if you have a manufacturer in town or a small welding shop that's looking to expand, talk to them and see, hey, we could get, we'll fight for a 1% rate or something.
we should do
Maybe you got a
something.
sign company that needs more space.
Man, that would be amazing.
Yeah, well, and it
Like, that'll
gets
be on my
better.
list.
Maybe you could get a 50,000 square foot building.
Wow, we should find that person.
Yeah, you never know.
Because a lot of time too, like the different circumstances under which you're able to use it, a lot of times it's tied to job creation. So like, even if it's only creating one extra job, but it'd have to make sure it doesn't just retain one job.
Yeah, it's usually set up in a way where you qualify for so many $1,000s in loans per job created at a certain wage level. So it kind of gets convoluted pretty quickly, but that's what we can kind of look at. Okay, here are the likely users of it, or you get somebody coming out of Rochester that wants to do it. You have that in your pocket, you put the application together and you're able to move it forward. So those are usually good deals, so.
So another quick question.
yeah.
With the cost of construction rising, are you seeing people use these differently or strategically? Like, I'm assuming cities usually have like a portfolio of funds that they're working with. Is that shifting too right now? Maybe that's too detailed of a question, or
We're
are
not
we
using
using any?
anything, like people just aren't doing anything right
Okay.
now. It seems like,
Sitting on their wallets.
yeah, at least in my experience, so the last couple of years, the interest rates generally are better, but it's usually formed as gap financing. So what that means is, you're not funding 100% of the project, you're not funding even 80% of the project like a bank would. You might be funding 25% or 50%. Most of these programs are gonna be limited to that 50% or under. Couple of different reasons. One, you're not really supposed to be competing with the bank's interest and that usually gets pretty tricky pretty quickly. Two, you usually don't have enough money to lend to that anyway. Three, you might want to spread it around town a little bit more than just put it all in one business, and it's riskier to put it all in one business. So usually you'll see cities do that as a way to help with like down payment assistance. You'll see it with maybe underwriting some extra costs. You might really write in some favorable terms, like we in Chatfield are trying to get a hotel. They've earmarked $100,000 at 0%. So they're gonna put that in there. We're just gonna let you, repay it, and we just want this thing. So I mean, that's one way where they really would get involved. Or there might be another bucket of funds that makes more sense for that particular case. But yeah, it's really interesting right now, is you just don't see as many people go through it. And the unfortunate part about this, or maybe it's a fortunate thing, it's a very public process. So when you have to come to a public body on the record in an open meeting and say, hey, I can't afford this otherwise, and so I need this special treatment, and here's all my information. It's not like going to the bank. So usually that limits the types of folks that are willing to go through that process. There's ways to safeguard their information and still comply with the open meeting law, but you still are talking to board members that are volunteers, that are your neighbors. And I've had plenty of businesses over the years saying, I know who's on that committee, and I don't feel comfortable exposing my financials to them, and so be it. That is what it is. So yeah, it's again, a higher risk, kind of a last resort for those loan dollars, but you can really implement them in ways that grow the fund, that help the community. Like I said, in Harmony, just about every business that's ever existed in town has used it at one point. Stewartville, when I worked with them, there was one business that would pay it off and come back for another one, pay it off and come back for another one. So I mean, they just were using it over and over again, which was great because they were happy to pay the 4% interest, which was way better than what they could get at the bank. The city was really happy because it was growing the fund and it was a solid business that there was, I mean, they're still going strong, so it's just kind of was looked at it almost as a line of credit if nothing else, so, yeah.
And one other thing relating to the construction costs going up, I have noticed in a couple different communities, we have been experimenting with a new type of revolving loan fund. So far, we haven't found places to supply money from, except originally from the city, but using them specifically for residential. Because most of the time revolving loan funds will specifically say you cannot use this for land acquisition and you cannot use this for building a house. And so we have some people who are really interested in starting a housing development, but they just needed some help with getting those the initial money in there. And we could never, ever help them. And so I know that in a couple of towns, we've been experimenting with it. So there is a way to kind of create a new program that would be able to help with building costs when it comes to residential, but for construction, for commercial, these regular revolving loan funds will work
That's
though.
what you're talking about. You're talking about somebody that really can't afford to do the project that they're doing.
Well, yeah, it's like getting a developer a good jump start.
Well, yeah, but Orinoco run into that with one development that he ran out of the money. And I'm just throwing that out there. When it comes to that, do we get to draw the, there's so many state statutes involved and stuff. Do we get to draw the parameters of what we loan that money out?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Just reaffirming that.
Yep, you guys have the final credit decision. So, typically what'll happen is an EDA will set maybe 2 or 3 members, depending on what your quorum is, as a loan committee. And so that loan committee might look at the business plan, their tax returns, the credit analysis.
Does it require a bond?
That's a lot, absolutely,
Performance
yeah.
Bond.
Yeah, that's probably more on the city side when you actually allow them to proceed to build public infrastructure and that kind of thing. But absolutely on that front, yeah.
Always a development agreement though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so it's, collateralization, what type of security are you gonna get, for these loans. There's a whole lot, there's a lot of reasons why you can say no.
Well, exactly, because we've had enough development agreements here in town that haven't exactly been in the city's best interest, so it's almost like we need somebody that's actually looking out for us instead of looking out to make sure attorneys keep getting paid.
So what I always see our role as staff, and Rebecca can chime in on this too, but our job is to vet those before it even gets to that loan committee, make sure that it meets the criteria, make sure that there's a sufficient application to come forward. And once that sufficient application comes forward, then let's have that closed door meeting to make sure our ducks are in a row, that this is a good thing, ask the questions that need to be asked, and really only bring projects that you guys can say yes to. And that takes individual meetings, that takes, you working with the board members, knowing how the board members see things and what their risk, is tolerating. There's a lot of things that go behind that, but it's very, very individualized. That even if the business comes in and says, hey, I want you to apply for this grant, and you know that they're not gonna repay, you don't think they're gonna repay you, you don't have to apply for it either. So, yeah. So.
And when
Yeah.
businesses do come directly to me and say, hey, I want your help on this thing, I will never just do it. I will always let you all know, because if it's something you don't want me wasting my time on, I won't do it. I'll talk to them about it, but just so you know, I'll always be communicating with you guys as to any conversations that I'm having.
So some other programs that are out there, just there's some, TIF and abatement, you'll hear quite a bit about. That's a topic for another night when you have other time to go through. Essentially, those are just property tax rebates in certain situations. And then the state has a list of programs that we kind of touched on as well. So whether that's loan funds, grants for redevelopment, grants for job creation, there's some tax credits that go directly to the developer as well. Then USDA, SBA have some programs as well. And the Rochester SBDC is a great resource for business planning and additional technical assistance that's free of charge. We talked about the limitations of power through the enabling resolution, so I won't dive into that again in great detail other than to say essentially in Orinoco, whatever you guys do approve, it's more of a recommendation to city council to approve. It's a relationship that I think you just want to build over time and you'll find the growth with that. It's it works really well, once you get that group there. So, what's expected of you as individual board members, the biggest thing is really just meeting attendance. If you don't have a quorum, you can't conduct business. So this is a public body. If you have somebody that's scheduled for a public hearing, or you have somebody that's on a deadline or a time constraint with a project, which usually seems to happen every time there's a project, they want to get it done yesterday, and the groundbreaking is going to be next week, and we got to get this approved now. If they don't have that quorum, you don't have the ability to grant what they're requesting, or even, say no to it. So just making sure that if, especially as projects come forward or things are working on, keep an eye out for that, because that's something that it does happen. It just life happens too, but making sure that you are kind of respecting that developer's time as well is important. Subject to the open meeting law. So all of these meetings are public. Certain communications that you have regarding this meeting can be public. If somebody were to request it, all the materials that you have, email communication, if you don't hit reply all, is kind of the standard city attorney language. I'm not sure if your city attorney ever provides open meeting law training, but that's always a good thing to do. If you haven't, especially for new boards, just as you do that, but.
Yeah, we had some training that the city attorney gave us between council and P and Z. Maybe it's water and sewer, but this is like within the last year and a half. So,
Perfect.
I
Perfect. Yeah.
actually did it since I came on planning and zoning,
oh,
so.
yeah.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
was either May or June of last year, I think we did.
And that's really the big thing with it, is just making sure that you're aware that you're open. Because it's usually one of those things that people will hit you with if they're not happy with something. So there are certain things though that just need a level of confidentiality. That's usually something that'll fall on staff to kind of trickle forward. There might be a project that's very not secretive, but they don't want it to be public for a variety of reasons until it's ready to move forward. Everything that's being requested though, any approvals, any dollars, any promises have to be made in a public meeting. So don't worry about that, but there might be a lot of homework that has to be done before it comes to that public meeting. In those cases, again, relying on maybe a special committee, maybe it's the board chair, maybe it's the mayor, maybe it's a special committee that's put together for that purpose. But they might have the ability to maybe focus in and learn more about what that project is, but just knowing that there is a level of confidentiality in a lot of the projects that do happen, especially on the front end. If there are conflicts of interest, making sure you're disclosing that along the city's ethics guidelines, and then creating and following a work plan. In general, you guys have the work plan, so you got that kind of all figured out too.
And we'll update those annually in here
Yeah.
too.
The expectations of the board members, just again, a willingness to commit to the process and to the organization, and kind of the general culture of what you guys develop here. And that'll change as board members come on, as they leave, as you go through processes, as you lose, you make a bad deal. There's a lot of cities that learn a lot when they make a bad deal and then they don't do that again. And so you kind of that learning as you go, and then also trying to do everything you can on the front end to make sure that you don't get there in the first place, but it happens. Again, regular attendance, preparation for the meeting. If you have questions beforehand, reach out to Rebecca, or reach out to the city administrator and say, hey, saw this in the packet. Do you have any questions? Or how can you explain it to me? Is it this, is it that? Can you run through some scenarios? We always appreciate that because it helps speed the meetings up. It helps, kind of create the understanding for the board members too. Committing to teamwork, committing to speak with one voice. This is one that's important too when it comes to the perception of the community, of the public. You can lose a lot of projects before they even come to you if the perceptions are always negative. And so, have your disagreements here around the table if things aren't working, but when the vote is taken, if it's a 5-0 vote or a 4-1 vote or a 3-2 vote, here's what we're doing when you walk out of the room. Everybody voted, we had our say, but majority rules. Let's keep on working and go from there. So that commitment to working with one voice. And just, again, whether you have a formal code of conduct or not, usually cities will have something in place or something at least in practice as to, talking about conflicts of interest and confidentiality and that kind of thing. Usually in a small town, there's only so many people to serve on these boards. conflicts of interest happen. So just making sure you, yeah. Okay, this is my business. I got an interest in it. I just can't talk about it for this time and I won't vote on it and just disclose it. So that kind of thing. Yeah, again, the meeting rules, you have agendas, you have your leaders running the meetings, the minutes from the previous meetings, everything's done by motions and majority rule. But the big thing is just, acting as a professional group, really goes a long way when you're trying to make your impression with, the public and prospects. And having those established, processes and procedures. A lot of times you'll be excited about the project moving forward, but you also don't realize that once that project gets forward or you get that grant, there's a lot of reporting on the backside. That can last years in some cases. So, it's usually not difficult, but it does take time. It does take energy. Especially when you have a developer that's not behaving. Everybody's excited to get the new corporate headquarters for whatever, construction company or whatever business is coming in. But when that person decides he doesn't want to follow the development agreement and doesn't build, and now everybody's asking, well, why didn't he do that? And why did we give him a sweetheart deal on it? Now you have to go through the process of collecting whatever the development agreement terms were. So.
So the city of Orinoco, we've had a lot of lessons learned in that the agreements were written by the developer. And so that's taken a whole new picture now. So the attorney is writing development agreements. So we're currently doing that with the two sisters.
Oh, sure.
So we write the agreement, they agree to it.
Yeah.
And so that's the way we're going forward with any of our agreements now. So we're gonna be making sure it's because of our lawsuits as a result of those things that were written incorrectly. So we have, that was a good lessons learned. And so that's the approach we're taking from a city perspective is that the city will write the development agreement for their approval. So
That's a great way to do it. It doesn't happen all the time. But one of the things I really try hard to do with the communities I work with is have the development agreement signed by the developer before it comes to the meeting as well. That gets to
Yes.
be tricky sometimes, and
It is.
sometimes you have a really good relationship with them, but
some actions to stop it, the building, so you do have agreements. So
Yeah.
it works that way too.
yeah, it's amazing how many times you rush through to get something done with a meeting and you bend over backwards and things don't happen on the developer's side afterwards, or they don't want to do this, or they don't want to do that, or,
Even if you have to, just say like pending, this will be approved pending signed agreement, like at least just throw that in there that they have to do it.
Well, if they don't sign it, then you don't necessarily gotta approve it either.
Right.
They haven't agreed to it, why should you?
Well, if there are
Exactly.
timeline crunches sometimes, like when you're like, yes, this is the project we really, really want, but they aren't ready to sign it yet because they want their attorney to look over it and they haven't done their due diligence yet. And so you're like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? And then you just say, okay, we will do this, but pending you actually completing this and turning it in so that if they don't sign it, then there's nothing there for them. It just covers your own tush.
They wasted a lot of time with that.
Mhm.
So we're taking the approach, no pending, just, it's gotta be black and white before we proceed.
All right, good to know.
This next one's more on us, but just so that you know, it's a consideration, having those standard guidelines, standard operating procedures, it's on us to make sure that you have those in place for programs. But also when you need to update them and that you guys have enough comfort level that they're up to date. Maybe that's once a year, looking at all the programs you do have active. And if nothing else, just saying, yep, we're good, we don't need any updates, or gosh, we should really think about this and, come back at another meeting and talk about it or something. So, and creating a process where you can maintain the records and some of these things have a long life. I just set up one last year that I think will die when I'm retired. So, it's some of these things have really long lifespans to them. So, just make sure you have good record keeping, at City Hall here. That's more on us to make sure that's getting done. So, your roles as an EDA in the community, project facilitators, making recommendations to city council for approval. Staff on our side of the table provides recommendations and ideas. You as the appointed and electeds are making the final decisions. So our role is really to bring those ideas forward. Say no when you want to. Hopefully we learn quickly what you're looking for, and there aren't too many of those, but we bring the ideas forward and then you react to them, the council reacts to them, and we keep learning, we keep growing, all within that work plan. And then maintain the administrative documents as well, so. Getting to the end, I promise. Yeah, again, just making sure that the administrative documents do stay up to snuff. The thing that really does get out of date from time to time is the business subsidy policy. State laws change every once in a while. Different programs change every once in a while. So, making sure that you're staying up to date on the language, just so that you're current. Again, if program loans and investment reports, need to be, written and maintained, those program guidelines have to be updated, maintained. One thing that I know we like to do is having some sort of annual activity report for you as well as the public, just so that you guys can remember what you did over the year. But it's also really important for the developers to see what you have done for others. One of the things you hear a lot in the development world is they'll try to eliminate you as an option before you even know that they're looking at you. As their people are doing their due diligence, they're gonna look at all the research they can find. If they can see a nice report online about all the dollars and help and friendly and all those things, it just goes to your credibility of being a place that they want to do business to. So again, just, putting your best foot forward, and also serving a way to justify the work you're doing to the public and to the council. So, and having that online presence and then historical information and archive data so that you have that information. There's a lot of bullet points under this next one, but essentially your job is to build relationships in the community. Your job is to represent the city from a sales standpoint. You're kind of the sales and marketing group for the city. If you think of the city as a business, what they sell is quality of life and a place to live and do business. They generate revenue through taxes. If you can create more taxes, that means everybody else is paying less, as a percentage. So cities want to keep up with street maintenance, keep up with, payments with the city employees, all that stuff. Those costs keep getting bigger and bigger every year. So you got to continue to grow the tax base. That's the EDA's job, is to continue to grow the tax base and kind of be those salesmen. Yeah, and again, creating the work plan, like Rebecca said, updating that every year is always a great idea. It might not change much if you have some bigger projects out there, that's okay. Or it might, get modified throughout the year as things come and go. So just know that that's not written in stone, but it's a good fallback for when you don't get those walk-ins. But making sure that you do have goals set with those work plans, so that when you get somebody that comes in with something just a wild card project, once you're up and running, I think you guys will have more and more of that, to know where it fits within your parameters and development goals for the community, so that it's easier for you to say yes or no or ask the right questions. But again, just in diversifying the economy, improving the tax base, creating a better quality of life for the community, that's really what those goals should look like. But that in a nutshell is kind of what the EDA can do. I would really, again, highly recommend having somebody like Mike Devani come in to talk about tax abatement and TIF, just how it might apply. And, especially if you're interested in doing like an industrial park or getting into property purchasing and development, that might be a ways off for you guys, but there's a lot of good resources out there, so.
One thing under maintain administrative documents, probably bylaws would be a little point there too, because we're hopefully talk about it tonight, but that's something else that needs to be annually reviewed too, so.
Yeah, and it's just, whatever documents you end up creating, make sure you're looking at them at least once a year to update them, because it's very easy to forget. It's very easy to get them out of date. A lot of them, it's just being aware and knowing that, okay, nothing's changed from the state. We don't have any new requirements, but we can just, acknowledge it and move on. Sometimes you're gonna have to, dig into a little bit. So it just depends on what the goals are of the group.
Any other comments or questions for Chris? Thanks for coming up.
Well, absolutely.
Great.
I'll stick around for the rest of the meeting.
Raised some good points about. I've heard the revolving loan fund, I've heard called GAPS, loans, transition loans. The idea is to just transitions this property owner to be able to approach a bank and say EDA is behind them. This is what they've contributed, so this kind of a good faith type thing, so.
Yeah, I have some banks that will send them to me before they'll even talk to them. So I mean, it's just depends on kind of what's going on, what the project is, and sometimes they don't really need it, but it's still short their pay. So,
I have a question that is very directly related to the building relationships slide that you had, and it is what I was going to bring up later on in the open topics. Is this a time that I?
Yeah, you certainly
can I
can,
just go
absolutely.
Right now. I always think about, as a business owner, I always think about how can we be frictionless when we do business? You know, how can we make the process smoother, easier, faster, less friction? Because I guess at the end of the day, you know, the customer will be happy and they're gonna wanna do more business, right? If we take that same mentality, you know, under the building relationships and when we're reaching out to people to develop in the city, how, if you lay out friction for people to do business with the city of Orinoco, and I'll just say a personal example, you know, from Shad Tracy's perspective from a sign code perspective in the city of Orinoco is it's probably just not fully established. And I know that I think the city actually sends it to a firm to look over whatever signs that we're proposing.
The codes.
And then it gets sent back, you know, from the engineering firm to do that. And it just sparked especially, people that I work with, and they're like, man, it seems when we go to these other surrounding communities, it's just like, we submit it, they send it back, no problem, or change this and no problem. And then, I mean, I get the dynamics that are happening in the city of Orinoco, but maybe there's ways, and that's just one example. And general contractors, I don't know. I know you had mentioned there has been challenges with some specific projects that have kind of come through recently, and you've had lessons, surrounding that. I have no idea on what the specifics are, but generally speaking, we probably should look, first inward to say, what are all of our points of friction that people are going to ask us about? I mean, funding is definitely one of them. But in the case of codes, if the codes are so tight, relevant to trying to get something done, when every other community around, if we submitted the exact same project to them, they'd be like, yeah, no problem. We probably need to reverse engineer that, and that I'm sure P&Z has to be involved in that. I just wanted to put that out there as we can say hey, come do business. We're a blank slate and we've got all this. And I was just talking to a guy today about that. And I want to be able to then say, we're also easy to do business with. And here are the things we established within the last 5 months. And, we really revised this code and we made it easier to do this. And in this specific zone, you can do this. And here's the type, So thinking ahead to reaching out to building these relationships, you don't want, what disrupts it the most is you reach out and then they're like, I'm really interested. All of a sudden it's just slow and hard and difficult. And then they're just like, forget it. These guys aren't even ready. We're going to go start looking elsewhere.
And that's actually one thing that we do really well is, we can hold their hand through the process. Sometimes it's just their eyes glass over when there's rules in front of them that, I don't know how to do it. Usually every city has some sort of rules, but if there's somebody there that can help them through the process or somebody that has the time to do that, I know we spend a lot of that time, helping them, even if we have a planner or a zoning administrator or whatever. It's just the zoning usually is French and economic development is usually Spanish. And it's just, when you start talking to them, it just doesn't communicate. So our role is kind of being that translator. I think for me, one of my biggest compliments when somebody, says, hey, good job, it's not just doing a good job, it's you made it easy for us.
Right.
And so that really speaks my language there with, if you can get to that point, especially, as you grow and find your groove with all the different city functions, you're really exercising some muscles here that haven't been exercised because get ready for business, and now you've got a group that's out there promoting business growth and actively trying to go get it. Now it's bringing everything else into line too, and so you'll get there, but that's an excellent observation of looking at how do you make it frictionless or as frictionless as government can be, so.
And in that regard too, maybe even specific to like sign codes and things like that. I mean, we deal with cities everywhere, all over the country, and some are really tight, like the city of Rochester. Some you're like, do you even, I mean, did anybody even look at this? I can't even believe you'd allow it. But somewhere in between there, there's a reasonable, type of a thing. And do you, in specific to specific code areas, do you recommend just us going to the other communities that are like us to say, just send us your codes and then reviewing, and then we establish, P and Z kind of goes through and says, I like this, but not that. In these areas, maybe we don't want all this crazy signage in a downtown area. We don't want it like the Vegas Strip. But on 52, you probably want people coming off the highway to, light it up, and things like that. Is that things that you guys do? Is that something that?
I think it all comes down to what direction the city council is wanting to go. It's tough for the EDA to do something like that on their own initiative, given that's more of a planning and zoning type function.
Right.
Not having an administrator right now might be tougher, but it would be something, if you had examples that worked really well to talk to the city administrator about that, talk to the council about that, or P and Z to kind of say, hey, you know what? Would you ever think about doing it this way? It accomplishes all the same things, but it's it takes something else out. I don't know.
And once all our establishing decisions are kind of put into place, I'll be able to get out and knock the doors of all the businesses. And I'll make sure that that's something that I ask people about, is like, hey, are there processes that you think could be easier? And then we could even look at those and then make a recommendation to the planning and zoning.
And that's probably ongoing, right? I mean, you get sticking points nonstop.
Everybody's got something.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter what it is, there's always gonna be something, so.
So when codes are adopted or changed, there's public hearings, of course. So that's when the public, yourself, would have the opportunity to review the codes and share your comments with public hearings. So I know we've had in the past, like Hilltop, Camping World, Thompson's Wholesale, or Thompson's Overhead Doors. They came to us, and so a lot of those had some variances to them,
Right.
just because of that exposure to Highway 52. So we have worked around the sign code, but I know that's I appreciate it's near and dear to your heart, at the same time, I think there might be something for, outside of the public hearings, we could look at that and take advantage and set up an ad hoc committee to review the sign ordinance or that type of thing, to provide your input. So from a businessman that makes signs, I think that would be, now we've done the same thing. We've gone out a lot of times, if we look at for example, the chicken ordinance. It's an ordinance, okay? So we went around and we talked to Pine Island, staff went out and got all these different ordinances. So in a lot of cases, that's one of the first things we do is just go out and look and see what other city ordinances have done, so. Hopefully with the appropriate staff we get on board, we can spend that time doing those kinds of things too, but I think we should take advantage of your input, or whoever P and Z, if it's a 151 code, what signs is.
It's
I don't think it
intense.
is, but-
Yeah, I don't remember.
But, I appreciate your input though. Good input, thanks.
I might also add, just to build off of that, recently, and I think they had the second reading last night at the Rochester City Council, is you might have heard that like a task force was created for downtown, and a number of different organizations came together, and that was response to businesses saying it's difficult to do business downtown and they'd love to see some improvements, which led to like a review then, I think, of what you're saying is what is difficult and where can they make improvements. So knowing that that's a bigger city, of course, the clerk's office did a review and came forward with like 25-ish improvements. And then brought those forward to council for approval. And those were things I think related to things that would normally need to go to council for approval that maybe administration could have been doing approvals, or changes in trends of approval. Which I think the businesses really saw a lot of great benefit from, including people that were trying to invest, because it may have slowed down the process by 30 or more days, which costs money, you know, for those businesses. So I think it's really relevant to, like, you know, it's just the overall process of what are the changes that need to be done, and what are we hearing from an EDA perspective from potential investors of those steps that slow things down, and are there other processes that could be improved?
And we can build our own committees as well. So if there's something in particular that needs to be looked at, you know, if it's having to do with housing or signage or anything, you know, we could put together a group that's going to be in charge of that, that can always keep working on that every month, and then only having to report back when there's activity or action items. But so we can do that with any topic moving forward.
I have just a follow-up question. A couple of the slides just referenced kind of annual review of maybe policies, procedures, documents, conflicts of interest. Is that something that CETA helps us to put a plan together to saying these are the things that, so you help to guide us with that and say, it's time to do these things?
Yeah, typically what I like to do is we just do it at the annual meeting. So
Sure.
most EDAs have their annual meeting in January or February or something. I don't know if you guys have really established what that is yet.
Tonight.
Oh, there you go. And you really don't have much right
Sure.
now, but you know, let's say you get some things up and running, you know,
Sure.
next annual meeting in January, what I do is we go through, we elect the board officers, we go through and we appoint the committees.
Sure.
We go and look at all of the programs that are evolved or that are standing programs. There's a staff report of, hey, everything's in good shape. We don't recommend any changes, or here's the 5 things that we think you should look at. But it also gives you the opportunity to physically see it, not that you have to remember everything, but you can, you know, that natural point of touching it and looking
Sure.
at it. And if you have an idea for it, we can, you know, implement that at that point too, or you know, go investigate or whatever. As well as the business subsidy policy, any reports that might be, you know, out there. Once you get like, you know, if you have only 1 or 2 of them, it's not the end of the world. But if you start getting like 5, 6, 7 things that are going on all at once, development agreements, you know, I've got one city that has a ton of development agreements that are all active at the same time. And each one of them has different criteria. So making sure that, you know, maybe twice a year, you're looking at, hey, is everybody up to snuff on their end of the bargain? And often it's not, that they aren't. So, you know, it helps everybody kind of stay on task, and then you're not picking on anybody. It's just a natural, okay, everybody's looking at it in June and December, and we're making sure everybody's paid their taxes, pay their utilities, they're doing whatever they said they were gonna do. And if they're not, we work with them first, try to educate them as to, or help them as to how to make it happen. But if there's no, you know, no use, then the board can decide how to proceed with that. But annual reports are probably the other one that you'd want to approve at your annual meeting. That'd be something we would put together, and then you guys can approve. But again, just kind of those general things. And as you grow, there might be practices that work
Sure.
better for you. But yeah, absolutely. So if you do have a preference on
Sure.
what that looks like, yeah, Rebecca would be able
Sure.
to comment that.
I guess my question is then off of that, and I know that we're kind of in this process of setting up the organization, kind of these first steps, just like what happens within the year, and like what are the expectations of what we should be accomplishing, and what are we anticipating for review? And, you know, as a framework, you know, it's helpful just to help guide it. So maybe there's an opportunity to have some discussion about how that might fit in.
Like the work plan?
Work plan, and then like the steps, I'm thinking like what are the approvals we need to do, or what are the things we should be thinking about as well? Perhaps like might be helpful for us to discuss so that we know what's coming or
Yeah.
what typically is going, if that makes sense. I don't know if there's been some discussion. I wasn't able to attend the November meeting, so I don't know if that was discussed there either.
So, yeah, I think that would be an excellent session to have, because there are things being put in place, like I said, development agreements, that's to be written by the city. Another thing are initiating from a city staff standpoint is cost security agreements. Is that we'll get a set of blueprints, or the city staff will get a set of drawings, to get a building permit. Well, the first thing we're doing now is you send out a security agreement to that company or whatever and say, okay, sign this and send us the check, because it's usually like a $3,000 or $5,000 check that we hold to cover engineering, looking at it, mainly from a site grading standpoint. So before our engineer can do that, in the past, we just kind of went ahead and did it and then kind of hope we get paid for it.
Sure.
So lessons learned, we don't do that anymore. So now we get a payment, we get a check for them to hold that we can draw from to pay the engineering to look at. So that's something that Renee's put in place to make sure that we're not left with the taxpayer paying for those engineering costs.
Well, I think too, like, to some of the ideas you were mentioning too, like the business subsidy policy, I know that's in your work plan that you guys saw in maybe November or October. Okay, let's make sure we look at that in July or by July or whatever. And then once you get that in place, it's more of just a review type thing. And then, we wanna try to explore options for revolving loan fund by December or or explore some options to get some tools for the next budget cycle, whatever those things are. Put those on the calendar so that you can hold yourselves accountable to that. And then that's just a matter of kind of timing and all that stuff.
Yep.
Once the programs mature, once you guys get people coming in, now it's more managing the projects that have come in. And it might take a while to, a couple of years before you have a full slate of those things to even really worry too much about it. But, at the same time, having those benchmarks is important. So yeah, that's something we can help put together too.
And I can I've kind of updated the work plan as of where we're at now, and I could bring that in actually next month, put that in the packets, and it can be something that we just kind of go over real quick and make sure that everything's lined up.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'll make sure that's in our next packet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any other EDA processes, questions, comments, concerns?
So we got an opening on our board, but I don't know if you want to.
Well, technically, you don't have to live in town, so I don't know.
Did it right, 45 miles one way.
Yeah, well, the pay is worth it.
We've got some lots of fun in town.
I'd love to see the headline on that one.
Thanks. All right.
If we get all kinds of developers, the vice president of SEAL is here.
When I moved to Chatfield, I was on the Rochester HPC, the Historic Preservation Commission, and I wrote to the mayor, and I said, Ardell, I can't be on the HPC anymore. I moved to Chatfield. And he goes, oh, we don't have that requirement in our ordinance yet. And I think he just didn't want to appoint anybody else to it. So I was living in Chatfield and I don't know, we were doing our thing, but that's been a few years now.
All right, we'll let you go.
Yeah, all right.
All right.
We'll just say he refused to work with us, so.
Put that in the minutes, yeah.
Only one Geeson per town.
There you
Only
go.
one Geeson per town.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if we want to pop to the top of the agenda then, we are going to enter into our annual meeting. And for that, we're going to be taking a look at who is going to be our president and who is going to be our vice president. Responsibilities of the president is you need to be at the meetings. If you can't, the vice president will take over instead for you. Need to be able to be available for signatures if there are contracts or agreements. So those are just kind of things, you just need to be able to be available on occasion. It's not that it's a daily occurrence. Same thing with the vice president. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot of extra that you need to do, but being a regular visitor and a positive person is definitely a plus.
And to remind ourselves, I think last year we elected Ryland as president.
Ryland's president, yep.
Currently.
Yeah.
Correct.
And who's the vice? Do we know?
Myself.
Oh, perfect, good. So if anybody would like to make a nomination.
I might also just add for context, just for the group, as just reminding myself, we chose that just because I think the startup process in Ryland was so close to everything already. Like that was the intention. We had some really good dialogue, I think, if I recall right, about who and what makes sense and kind of all those different pieces. And I just reflecting on, the amount of work that it takes to start something up and how important it is to stay aligned and
Yeah. Yeah, without somebody like us without a staff member, I shouldn't say necessarily just us, but without a staff member, the president is the one who really does oversee all the day-to-day operations of the EDA. So they're the ones who are answering the emails, checking the budget, checking all the documents that come in before they go out to the board, all of that kind of stuff. But with one of us hired on, at least you don't have to worry. President won't have to worry about those things. That's what we'll take care of for you.
I guess I'm kind of disappointed we don't have all of them available here tonight for the annual meeting.
If you wanted to push off the elections, you can certainly motion to do that and we can table it till our February meeting. Otherwise,
Just
I
what we've
looked
been
at
thinking.
this, who says you're.
right now, I think we're only missing Jan. We're just missing Jan.
And Adam.
Oh, yes, Jan and Adam, and then we've got our one open seat.
I guess for discussion, maybe before a nomination goes forward, just reflecting on the amount of where we've gotten and what's coming up. I might propose that we look at the president role in a similar fashion, just with the amount of work that has to happen still. I don't know what that looks like, but maybe that's part of the discussion is what do we see this next year to do? Because it seems like it's still a lot of establishing processes and procedures, alignment, working closely with P and Z, working closely with council. Like I could see how that alignment still could be really important as we continue to stand it up. But I would be interested in your perspective and other perspectives with being in other committees. So I don't know if we need a formal motion to have the discussion, but.
No, we
that's
can
what-
just,
okay.
if you guys want to table it though, we certainly can. I just want to make sure that it's, everybody's on the same
I've been
page.
here for an hour and a half. I don't know if I'm qualified to make much decision.
I think Jamie makes a good point. I think we haven't looked at bylaws, but I think it's still getting your feet on the ground and we missed December and so now we're just kind of starting out this year, so.
Yep. So I will
So I
go
could-
ahead and move the annual meeting items to next month because I'll also have that work plan here for us to be able to review at the same time. So would that be,
That's fine.
that better?
Well, I think that, I mean, I guess what I was suggesting is that we keep the president as.
Oh, just to keep the same as last year.
At least the president role. I don't want to nominate myself, but-
I'll nominate you to stay there.
but I was saying that I think that it was
Oh, okay.
that was good. I also recognize that we're missing two other people, so if the group feels like we want to wait. But I think from an operational perspective and wanting to make sure that we're continuing to set up for success, I'd be comfortable moving forward with Ryland as president or not making the motion to have Ryland be president.
I agree. I think having both of you still in place, moving, I don't want to say that I don't think we accomplished anything last year, but getting CETA involved is going to make us go a lot faster, right? So I think we're still kind of in the same mode as we were last year, so I don't necessarily see a change as being relevant. So, and not only that, but selfishly, I will not be here on the next meeting either, so.
Okay.
And I don't know what we need relevant to, all of a sudden we get to next meeting and we have the same, maybe 4 different people that are here. Whatever, different combo of people, so
The next
at some
meeting-
point, we have to make a decision.
Yeah.
We
Right.
have to move on.
Well, if you're making a motion for them to stay where they're at, I'll second them. To keep those, we need leadership for moving forward to keep the momentum.
Yeah, I make a motion for that.
I'll second it.
All right, so for voting, all in favor, please say aye for president for Ryland.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Do you
all
accept?
opposed, you're abstaining.
I thought it was separate vote for vice
And
president.
then for
All
vice
for president.
president would be all in favor.
Aye.
Okay, all opposed, none. Excellent. You were both elected unanimously.
So I think just one comment too is just our February meeting is when we're having our community engagement. And we got surveys, maybe you'll give us a report here, agenda, but I think that's gonna be an exciting time. I think that's really gonna help set our activity going forward as well.
Yes. And yeah, I guess so the February meeting might be a little different. Just because we're gonna be having that big event that night too.
We probably won't have an agenda though. You have a plan for what you want to do, but.
Right, and it's kind of up to you guys. If you want to have the meeting right before or right after, we certainly can. Otherwise, if there's nothing that needs to have any action done on it, we can certainly wait till March to have that when we have all of the results to.
Let's see what we can do in the next 30 minutes.
Fair enough. Let's go. All right, if someone would like to take a look at the minutes from November 28th. Oh, yes, 2023. Oh, that is 2023 though. Okay. November.
You'll change it on the agenda for tonight, all right?
Yes.
We'll make a motion to approve the minutes for November 28th, 2023. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Oppose? It's approved.
Beautiful.
Business?
All right.
Update on where we're at with the.
So for the event planning, everything is already in place. The first advertisement should run tomorrow in the Zumbrota newspaper, and it'll be running every Wednesday up until we have the event, so it'll be 5 weeks. So those are already, it's a 2-column by 4-inch advertisement. And the budget, Compure Financial, their agreement was signed at the January 16th city council meeting. Also the flyers that will be hung up around town, a little bit closer, are included in your packet. It's very similar to what the advertisement's going to be looking like and the information that's on there. There's also a draft budget in your packets. That budget is what we drew up to write our grant to Compere, which is why down at the very bottom, you'll see report, research and writing, $6,000. That's what, it's basically part of what you guys are paying me to do it essentially, because that's like the standard rate that I've been able to find. So that's why that's in there, but that's part of our match for the program. So it's like an in-kind match from Orinoco. Whereas most of the rest of this, all of the supplies will be paid for with that grant as well. So we aren't actually gonna be spending a single tax dollar on any of the pieces that we need for it. Because we were able to do all of our match in
That's all
kind.
the Compare grant money taken care of.
Yep. And then what's left over can go towards the contract but EDA. And then, I am staying up with it and making sure as we purchase things that everything is accurate with this, so we'll have a perfect one to turn in at the end. We are starting to get surveys back. We mailed them out last week. Hopefully all of you received one and they didn't all get lost. I've gotten back 12 paper copies as of today and 9 online ones. There've been a total already of 16 scans on the QR codes that we have. So I'm able to track all of that. And will continue to do so as they come in. I have already entered in the paper copy ones, and I can honestly say that people are very honest with their feedback and have been really, really open. It's actually a lot more participation per survey than what I've seen previously. So everybody seems to be very interested and happy that they had the opportunity. So that's been a good thing.
Does honest translate into rude?
50% of the time.
So I was reading between the lines there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would rather somebody say how they feel and let it be something that can, maybe offend someone somewhere, but it's just gonna be me reading them essentially. Well, the offensive ones, I guess. So I would rather hear that because it's not personal for me, whereas it might be personal for someone around the table. But all of the comments you guys will get access to see. Because they'll be at the end of the report, because I will include them, but.
My assumption is when we go through and start to analyze the data, it's the themes that we pulled out
Yeah.
into what it is, that'll help us understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could I ask you a quick question just about communications and marketing? So you mentioned, and I was looking at the budget, that Zumbrota newspaper, and I see that the Post Bulletin is in there. Is there consideration for sending emails to like, I'm thinking the homeowners associations and for them to distribute additional pieces, information or any social media posts?
Not for this yet, no.
Okay. We have really active homeowners associations, I'm
Yeah.
assuming, like ours
Right.
is fairly active, Cedar Woodlands 1 and 2. So that could be something we could consider is just getting an email out to them to.
Yeah, regarding the event, that'd be
Regarding the
great.
events and reminding them that there's, they should have received a survey. And the same thing, I think, for the city of Orinoco has a fairly active Facebook page, and I know that
Mhm.
most of the homeowners associations repost those, so it just might be another way to get some additional
Okay.
engagement.
Would I be able to shoot some of that information over to you for the homeowners?
Yeah, we can probably
Okay.
get it to some of the other ones.
I've got the other homeowners,
Yeah.
Riverwood Hills.
Okay, perfect.
And Cedar Woodlands
I will send to
has
both of
one
you.
and two, right?
We have
Or
one and
just
two. Um,
Paul and Christine,
yeah, Paul right now, Pigsley is the president of the
Bixley.
Pigsley.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, I have his address. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send a message to both of you guys with all the info that we can share.
Just thinking that because
Mhm.
we really don't have a center of gravity downtown at the moment,
Right.
it might be a way to get a hold of people while they're.
Yeah, and we are not going to be doing the Post Bulletin because I checked what their numbers were for the Orinoco area and really it wasn't gonna be worth the money to, Get hit like 10
Distribution here
houses.
isn't that well, is it?
not here, no. And Zumbrota, it's only about 105 for theirs here, but at least theirs, I believe, get picked up at the gas stations and those
Illinois,
things.
We don't have any distribution outside of personals.
Right, they just get in the mail, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, prescriptions. Yeah.
Yep. So we've got those running. Any other quick questions about community engagement? Awesome. EDA bylaws review and approval. In your packets are a copy of a draft of authority bylaws. We did already send these off to the city attorney, so he has reviewed it already and hasn't seen any problems. I think some of the big things in there, I mean, obviously, we outlined everything. Who gets to sign checks, who has to be around for each of the different types of things that we do for governing, all of those. It also has information about us having our annual meeting. It's literally just, I guess, your
You're
how-to.
you're asking earlier about the enabling resolution, and we should have probably added that it was 2023-05. I thought it was back in 21.
Oh, yep.
So-
Yeah, actually, I think, Paul, I sent you that already.
Okay.
And I don't have a copy of it with me, but
Okay.
I did have the resolution number.
You
Yeah.
you just sent it since we sat down here.
Yeah, I just emailed it just so that you have it, but I have the number.
So we can put in the right dates whenever we officially. put it into
Yes.
that.
And as of now, I just put January 20th because that seemed like a good idea at the time.
Well, I see on the front page under authority, I just read it through quick this afternoon. It says that this was started May 16th, 1995.
Oh. Oh, the city of Orinoco. Yeah, I don't think that was 1995. Established by native. Okay, so I don't know why that's
We're
there.
talking about the enabling resolution, so.
Yeah, that was February 21st, 2023.
21st, 2023. Okay, so we'll get that updated. Thank you, Paul.
All right, so we'll continue, maybe. We do have any type of meeting on February, be probably to approve the bylaws, I guess, that'd be good to get that approved instead of going to March. So.
Yep, absolutely.
Whole business. So, at our November meeting, Jan Thronson his term was ending, and, we, made a decision that we didn't follow our bylaws or enabling resolution. And
That's my
that,
bad.
We made a motion to have him extend to a 6-year term, and we inadvertently done that incorrectly. We should go to the council for approval to do that.
Yeah, it should have been a recommendation rather than a.
Recommendation for his approval, so we'll have that on the
February.
January 16th meeting.
February 16th. Because January's already had their council meeting.
Yeah, I'm sorry, February 20th. Yes, I guess 16th, yeah, February 20th is when we will officially send the recommendation to the council for approval for Jan. The open seat is still open. This January, February timeframe is really kind of made everything kind of crazy here, getting stuff done. I know city staff Renee is really busy, so we'll probably do a March, have it interview in the March meeting, so we have our. Will probably be the best time to do that. We're also looking at a council vacancy to handle in the February meeting, so let's just wait until the March meeting. So
One thing I think it'd be good to do, since we're having this community input meeting, let's make it known that we have an open seat at that meeting, so
Mhm.
maybe we can attract somebody out of that, you know? If you're coming
To do
here
what,
for
I'm
that,
sorry.
let's use this that night to really make sure that the city knows about that.
Oh, yeah. That'd be
So we
excellent,
can-
yes. Yeah, make that work.
If they come to that, or maybe have more interest in getting involved.
All right, and for contact info, did each of you receive the packets this month?
I'm locked out of my emails.
Okay, is there a different email you want me to use for you, or you're getting that figured out?
I sent the note to the administrator, but I don't know who that goes to. Like when I clicked on, you can't access this, send it out to the
Okay.
administrator, but I don't know where in the computer.
Yeah, I'm
that
guessing
goes to.
that's a Renee.
So I can give you my personal email if you'd like.
Yeah, that way at least we know that you're getting it until we've got it figured out.
One thing about personal emails, I know Paul does that too, but, I know it's important for council, I'm guessing it's important for EDA too, is that record retention. Because with record retention, it's gonna be difficult if you use your personal email.
Sure. We could probably troubleshoot the other one first to see if we, whatever reason why it's locked.
Okay.
So I would encourage us to, and Paul, in your case too, to really seriously consider using the EDA or the council agenda because of record retention as a council member.
I actually don't know if I got the agenda. I got the email obviously asking
The,
if I was
yeah.
gonna be here.
You had a temporary, they gave you, or Shirley gave you, excuse me, Sunny gave you a temporary password.
No, I'm active on that. I got the email asking if we were gonna be here on that email.
Okay,
But not
today or
the,
The other,
earlier
last week
one?
Friday, but I don't think I got the agenda.
okay. Cause I had sent out the packet the week before. On
It was like midweek
Thursday,
last week.
yeah, Wednesday or Thursday. Okay, just so you guys know, when I do send out the packets, I will put on there, please respond to let me know if you can make it. I did get that back from you two both, but just make sure that you do let me know, because then I know that A, you got the packet, and B, if we're gonna have a quorum. So that way we can kind of help troubleshoot some of the communication stuff while we're getting started too. But I will get your personal one just until you get the other stuff figured out. That way we can still communicate.
The packet was in the email that you were asking if we were gonna be here. Is that right?
You know, it was the one before that was from last week.
Okay,
Yep, the one reminding was just the
got
reminder.
it. I did get that.
Okay.
So,
Right. When it comes to my monthly reports, you guys will get one of these from me every month. You'll have 2 this month, or apparently I just put in December, so you didn't. I will email you guys November. Oh, never mind, it's on the backside of December.
Yeah, it's something that we got.
Okay, well, it'll show you outreach and networking, which is gonna be the people who I've been working with personally throughout the month. So if I'm doing business visits, you're gonna see all of the businesses that we went to and all the people that I've spoken with. When it's just working on city locations, you'll probably see something more like these where it's Ryland and Renee on top and a couple other places. Then we'll show new projects, taking a look at what I've been working on. Sometimes it won't be necessarily mentioned in the agenda. The reason for that is that there's nothing really to actionably discuss that night, which is why then it's just right in there so you can see what I've been doing. So you'll get one of those every single month. There isn't really anything on this month that is anything different from what we've already talked about. I think the only thing is, yeah, basically just talking about next week. So, or not wait, next week, but next month's meeting. Because you guys would like to look at the bylaws next month, do we want to plan on having a meeting about 20 minutes before or?
Well, could we ask all the members to look at and send comments? And I don't know if it's official, we can do it
We can do
a
everything but
meeting,
the
but at the same
voting.
time, we just want feedback, I guess, to see if we're on the right path, but in my opinion, I think as far as the lawyers, we're okay with it. Unless we're missing really something that's objectionable, I think we should.
Is that kind of considered, serial meeting, bouncing that stuff around, or?
Well, we should, that's a good point. We should blind copy if you're gonna send it to Rebecca, but blind copy the other members if you wanna share it with the others, or
Yep.
just send it to her and she can collect the comments, then blind copy it out to all of us with any updates. If everybody's responding, we could do a couple different ways, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like we can do everything but the vote that way.
Yeah.
So can you just describe again what next steps are? So the bylaws are with city attorney at the moment.
No, he's already sent them back.
Already approved them.
Yep.
So we're just looking for final comments
Yep, final comments and
so they
approval.
could be incorporated
Yep.
into.
As soon as we approve them, then we send them to city council so that they can approve them. So if we aren't approving them tonight, then they won't be approved at the January or the February meeting. It'll have to be March. Before they can actually get activated essentially, because they have to have council approval.
I guess looking at our actions between now and March is probably just gonna be the meeting and gathering all that information from your
Yep.
standpoint. So I don't think the committee probably itself, or the board's not probably gonna have any interaction until March. So
Yep. So as long as you guys do your homework.
yeah, let's do the gather comments. If you want to send something out to everybody. Asking for a response, I got it. So we can get some feedback, yay, nay, or consider this change or
Yep.
something.
Absolutely.
I think really here, just knowing I'm sitting here and I read through it. And I was looking at organization part, section 2.2. And you could say, read it, because you know, I'm just gonna start here, midway down the page, it says, the president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary shall be elected annually by the board at the annual organizational and business meeting of the Board of Commissioners. No commissioner may serve as president and vice president at the same time. And then backside, it goes back to the offices of secretary, treasurer, and assistant treasurer need not be held by the commissioner, by a commissioner. Does that mean it doesn't have to be somebody on this,
Correct. So
would be somebody else could be the,
that's what typically what ends up happening is because the secretary, not the secretary, but the treasurer has to be someone who can do checks, right? So typically we end up just making it the city clerk.
Okay.
And then when it comes to a secretary takes minutes, so I am your
okay,
secretary.
so I want to move on, I want to move on to the next sentence. It says the offices of the president and vice president shall be held by a commissioner. The board is also annually elected to fill the assistant officer's position of assistant vice president. So we have a president, a vice president, and an assistant vice president. And assistant secretary shall be in the same manner, at the same time as the officers. And you get down to the bottom of pursuant to law, however, the position of assistant vice president and assistant secretary shall not be considered statutory officers. Well, Isn't it being all this done by statute of the state of Minnesota?
Yep,
So the it'd be statutory.
yep.
So it says, but it says they won't be considered.
Well, no, not the secondaries. Only the people who are in those primary positions are going to be,
Right, I guess, okay then.
it basically says they don't have authority, whereas the other ones do.
Picking on, we have president, a vice president, and an assistant vice president. It's kind of like.
I don't know any,
How many assistant?
The legislators were on a roll when they wrote that.
I know, right?
They must have been.
And I don't know about you, Chris, but I've actually never seen an EDA board with an assistant vice president before.
No.
Most people don't take up on those.
Because the bylaws are usually, there's, one of the statutes in 469, I don't know if it says it's power or whatever it is, but it's basically what you're reading is cut and paste from statute.
Mhm.
And so, you don't have to elect all of those positions. A lot of boards will either, like Rebecca said, appoint, a treasurer and a secretary that are more staff related. Or you'll have a kind of a name and only a name type position. So, maybe you have a board member that's a secretary and another board member that's a treasurer, but everything's delegated. So you're covered. If you don't enlist those, it's not the end of the world. If you want to do that and go to that level, great. But yeah, you could probably even strike them if you wanted to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'm thinking, just to strike that kind of stuff, because there's only 7 people, there's like 9 positions that are talked about.
Most cities will just cut and paste what was in the statute. So, yeah, very templated.
Okay, so I will go ahead and remove the assistant vice president and assistant secretary roles.
Thank you. So it was
Yeah.
odd. There's more positions than we had people to fill.
Right, and I'll make sure that it's updated before I'll send out another copy along with the notice to have everybody look through and send back feedback, so I'll update it before I send it out.
Yeah, the fun thing is if you have this quorum four people for a 7-member board. If the 4 of you show up and you're not any officers, you just decide who wants to be the leader for that meeting anyway. So in the end, it really doesn't matter too much, except with who's signing stuff, who's got the ability, the board chair, if there's something that's more confidential, might be the point of contact. And that's really just everybody recognizing they have maybe an inside track on a couple things before the rest of the board does. So.
All right, any other thoughts, questions, concerns for the night?
I have back to the community events.
Mhm.
Was there a format for the event itself?
Yes.
And then, was that discussed at a previous meeting or is that amended somewhere?
No, I don't think it is in the minutes.
Okay.
I guess I don't know that we've actually really talked about it, but it'll be set up into stations. So like if it's in this room, we will have stations around and then also tables where when people come in, they will sit at a table. Each table will have a topic discussion that they'll be able to discuss during our first round. And it'll have questions on it about, how you perceive your community as a group. What do you guys think are the things that are missing or any ideas about different relating to their topic? And then we're gonna do a little share round, and then there will be the stations, which will have those big, giant sticky pad boards. And they'll be able to, at their tables, look at each one. One will be economic development, one will be diversity, one will be transportation, housing, we'll have different sections. And they can then say what it is that they think we need to do better, or what they think is great about our housing, what we need to do for housing. It'll be a very similar to like a SWOT analysis. Oh gosh. Try to remember what it even stands for.
Thank you.
Yes, there we go. Strengths, weaknesses,
Opportunities.
yes, opportunities and threats. So we'll put in those based on each of those sections. We're usually able to get some really good feedback because people seem to get into that a little bit more, because then once they do it, they get to sit down and then they're gonna have little star stickers. They get to go around again and look at all of them and say, oh, I really like this one. And you kind of see who really thinks which ones are really popular, which ones aren't. Kind of gives you a little bit more feedback on those processes. So
How does that go from a recording perspective? It's an official meeting, like this is very obvious and somebody could go back and recap that, but if you're scattered throughout, It's almost like,
So what we did something similar to this in 2016. We had a grant that was given to us, we worked through Southeast Minnesota together, I think. There were two cities selected for $1,500 to have. And we put our name in, we got it, and also Good View was the other one. And so we had the design, University of Minnesota design team come down, and so we did the same thing. We brought the community in, invited different people to come in and did the posters, and in fact, I still have the posters. If you'll look at them, we can compare them too, but I do the same thing. So what we could do is we could still have a meeting announcement put out. We can still record it, the activity.
Yeah, 'cause the minutes will basically be like a synopsis of what happened.
But, so we can record what's going on and just pick up what audio they can, but it'd be good to document because we'll have a quorum here probably. So we should have a meeting agenda, so.
Yeah, and when I do write up the minutes for that too, it will note in there that everything that happened that night will be coming out in a formal report. And that way, if someone really does want to know what happened that evening, they'll have that formal report that'll be able to outline everything.
And we do the same thing. We would take each of those post-its and just typed up and it's documented what we do get. So.
I don't think I mean, we might just have to check the laws. I don't think it has to be recorded as long as official business is not taking any action on. So I don't think we have to video record it, but I think that the community really appreciates the minutes and the recaps. and
I think the big thing we would only need to record is if we sat down.
If we had our
Business at-
pre-meeting. So just a couple notes, some things, and I geek out in engagement, just. so-
That's great. I like that.
in my life. What might be helpful, I think, for participants is how long the time expectation, we say 6:30. But maybe a bit more information about, like, expectation is in an hour, wherever, so people can plan their evening.
Right.
And perhaps sometimes a little bit about what will happen. Just even giving them some questions to consider, or something like that, so people can feel a bit more prepared coming
Okay.
in. Might be helpful,
Yep.
in that process.
Okay.
Ultimately, this information can go into our comprehensive plan too.
Yeah, and there will be
Easy.
stuff from every segment in there. I mean, everything is put into categories.
Sounds great, thank you for your
Yeah.
comment.
Of course. All right, anybody else have any items for the evening?
You walk-on items, we hadn't touched base on.
I do just have a quick question about process. I think maybe this came up last time and I'm just forgetting. There are developers that have approached homeowners associations about conversations that they're hoping to have. And oftentimes, like, the homeowner association, at least ours, will come to me and ask me as an EDA board member, have you heard about this or what these pieces are? And I know that's not the formal process yet, or maybe it will never be, but I just wanted to bring it to the group's attention that, it seems like that's what's happening out in the community. Is that they're asking for a meeting with the homeowners association about potential development. And I don't know if we can help guide or if there's something that can be helpful, because it seems like sometimes people have a negative knee-jerk reaction to something only having partial information. So just wanted to share that with the group.
Negative from what standpoint?
Oh, I mean, I think anytime you do something close to someone's home, people get a bit nervous. Rezoning conversations, I think, is what is causing some like stir. And so, however, I don't have an opinion one way or the other, but
Just part of the process.
part of the process,
Okay.
and where does the EDA play a role in that, if that makes sense, like, when groups are evaluating potential investments, I know that they're gathering information or
Mhm.
creating awareness. They want to create buy-in, so if they do come to P and Z, they get the support, but I don't know where the EDA plays a role in that, like, because we're not
Times
actively.
people will
involved in it.
develop their ideas with the EDA as far as if they're looking at needing a loan to do something, they'll come and they'll talk to us and we'll make sure that they get they have all their documents ready, they have all their procedures ready before they go to P and Z to make sure that when they go there, they have everything they need so that it can get its approval and then come back to us. So typically we try to do a little bit of that vetting. Obviously, there's gonna be some projects that have to go straight to P and Z. Especially if there's a ton of variances and all sorts of other things, but for some standard stuff, you could certainly send them my way and I'll be happy to get them
That's a
where they
good
need to go
point,
otherwise.
because, I think that's all part of learning the role of EDA
Mhm.
and where EDA fits in between developer and P and Z, because typically it's like in the case of the development that you're making reference to on the housing, 43 acres, that trust, it's, the developers wanted to find out who the HOA was because they go talk to them. That wasn't, it really wasn't a city, and that was a developer effort,
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
but at the same time, what you're saying is it'd probably be good to have the developers come in and talk to EDA first.
Mhm.
And then from there be P and Z or to the HOAs or the neighbors or whatever the case may be, but that's a process I think we need to
Yeah.
identify.
They probably
And
don't know
typically they
that
read through the zoning codes. If it's a good project, they typically will read through the zoning codes before they even come to the city at all. So that's why usually they can come to the EDA and get most of their questions taken care of. And the EDA can kind of vet the project. And then if it qualifies for everything.
Because the EDA is newly established, they may not know, but we may also want to define, like you said, what is the flow we would
Yeah.
love them to follow. And I know that we're a small community, it just doesn't happen that way sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think it's helpful to know where we play a role, so that way when questions do come, we're.
Like in the case of the rezoning, typically they would fill out a rezoning permit to do that act, to
Mhm.
initiate any action, But right now that action goes from the rezoning to P and Z.
Yep.
So we need to figure out where EDA fits in that type of rezone or variance to
Right.
the rezone or CUP.
I mean, and it's extremely helpful to have someone from P and Z on the board. Because of the fact that you're able to help with kind of the way with council, like you're able to say, okay, council, here's what EDA has been doing. You're able to do the same thing, because really the EDA and P and Z are like, they're brother and sister to each other.
Just to clarify, I had to resign my position on P and Z.
Oh,
We had
Oh, that's
three
right,
council
that's right,
members
that's
on there, so.
oh, I got
I'm no
you.
longer on P and
Oh,
Z,
you're-
but
Okay,
I could probably give you a little insight.
So that would be where Wendy would fit in.
Yep.
There may be
Yeah, I
instances too.
misspoke there. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, there may be instances, and it may be more frequent than not, where a developer may not come to EDA
Mhm.
either. EDA is extremely helpful with putting projects together, especially if there's any assistance that's needed of it, to help it. Or even just with the technical assistance of, okay, here's how we walk through the process.
Mhm.
Planning, planning and zoning is probably gonna see every single thing that happens just from a review process or any of that kind of thing, but, if they're not asking for any financial assistance, if they're not needing any technical assistance, if they're not looking for any help with walking through the city process, there may not be a reason for them to, other than, staff or, maybe an interested member of the board might really want to know what's going on in that project, because they
Right.
might relate to some things or some questions that P and Z may want to look at or plan. So it's just being in the know. Yeah, but, that's the first time I've ever heard a developer going and talking to the homeowners association first before they come to the city.
That's
So
what they did.
Is there an
Well, they
element
came
of
to the city first.
confidentiality though?
With a concept,
Shared all their
no action,
documents,
just a
what they-
presentation, here's what we want to do, and I
HOA.
think that was.
And your
They
HOA
went to the
makes
HOA to
it
get their-
public, or do
because
you
they were
ask, or
bordering
do
and
they- is
some
it
of
just
their
assumed
conduct
that
was
it's public
complimenting
with
what's
the rest of
across
the
street.
homeowners, or?
That makes
So
sense.
basically, he came to the HOA because he's a homeowner in the neighborhood. And then,
oh, I wonder if that had.
then
something to
the
do with it.
HOA, they came here to the P and Z meeting, or the city council meeting that night.
I'm not sure.
That Paul Janetta was here. He says-
Well, that was a P and Z meeting, that was in
That was a P
November.
and Z meeting, and so we had
October.
the,
I know it's never gonna flow the right way, but it just made me, just in general, like,
Yes.
like, where does EDA fit in? And my understanding is like what you said, is that when there's technical assistance
Mhm.
or funding required, there would be like a stop on the bus line to come
Yep.
here.
Exactly.
Basically, if they need assistance, be it financial or informational, shoot them over to the EDA first and then we'll get them figured out. And that way Renee won't have to deal with any of those questions. We can get those off her plate.
But it also seems like if this organization or this commission is set to help to great quality of life. And it would be good for some type of like, if there is a project coming through that there's a brief or whatever is appropriate from a confidentiality perspective shared so that this group is just in general aware of what that is. And I know that I don't know how that fits in or if that's
Right.
something we want to consider, but it might be something for us to think through.
And I have told Renee, and I will tell the new city administrator once one is hired, if the city is working on a project, like say the city is gonna be upgrading another park or is looking to try and get a new city facility, keep me posted on those, because if there are programs out there and it's not necessarily EDA straight related, I can still assist with grant writing if there is something that you guys need help with. So just keep me posted. Especially almost everything is related to the EDA, to be honest. In one way, shape or form.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys ever have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email too. Like I'm a firm believer in there's no such thing as stupid questions unless you ask me 8 times.
Make a motion meeting adjourned at 8:37.
Second.
Say aye.
I,
Aye. Approved. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you guys, appreciate all of that. You guys are making big strides, so a lot of details.
All the fun.
Oh, yeah. So I really see the EDA as kind of that sales group, you put in the thing, here's what we want to see happen, let's go try to get it. You're gonna have stuff walk through, like this project you were just talking about. You may have to get involved, you may not have to get involved, but the ones that you're trying to put together, you're probably gonna be really involved. The ones that are really, kind of tenuous and because there's just no money or there's a lot of issues with it, but you really want it, you're gonna be really involved. So it's really, you'll find that groove, you'll get there, so.
And as soon as we have programs figured out or kind of how our processes are gonna go, we can also put together a nice package for anyone who might be interested in doing business with Orinoco that'll have, maps and zoning information and why they should be living here.
Just generally knowing what's going on.
Stop recording.
Mhm.